Yeah, you got it. Okay, so we're live today. This is Zach Roedde. I'm with my good buddy Mark Binet, and today we are going to be talking about masculinity and also about Mark's book that he just put out, Truth Cock. And I just read about half of it last night and a little bit this morning. So I want to really talk about this because there's a lot of really interesting things that you brought up in the book, and you've brought up a lot of that stuff on your wall already. And one of the things I want to start with is about your association with the far left and how it has destroyed this natural polarity of like the healthy masculine and healthy feminine, and kind of it's like ingrained ingrained misogyny in women, right, where they reject their own femininity, and ingrained misandry, right, misandry in men. Yeah, and which emasculates men and masculinizes women. So I want you to I'd love to hear more about your perspective on that to get started.
All right, so I'll give an orienting generalization about far left. Oh, by the way, it's great to have everybody here. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Zach. You're a wonderful.
Thank you. We got 12 people tuning in so far.
Hey, 12 people. So an orienting generalization about the far left ideology. So we can think of it as what's called cultural Marxism, which is looking at all these identities pitted against one another, and pretty much everyone is oppressed from one angle or another. And so what happens is particular identities are regarded as very oppressive. For example, men. Men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, okay? And what that does is it creates a kind of subtle caste system between men and women, men up here, women down here. Now, irrespective of how true that is, when we upload that program, there are consequences for polarity. Consequences for polarity in relationships between men and women, specifically between the masculine and feminine. So if a woman is very identified with the narrative that she's oppressed by the patriarchy, then she will masculinize to protect herself from that foe. And therefore, if she's together with a man and she's in her masculine and that man is in his masculine, then they're depolarized. And so you can't have that awesome high polarity relationship. One of them has to give. Now, if the man has internalized the oppressor identity because he believes in this cultural Marxism, this far left ideology, then he self-emasculates. And therefore, they're off balance. Well, actually, that's his attempt to get them back on balance, but I call that pseudo-polarity. So the man is just trying to please her because he sees himself as bad.
Just keep talking. Find one more minute to talk about stuff, Mark. I'm just sharing. I'm going to my
I don't want to go too far off. I just want to make sure that that's not, too esoteric or too far flung.
It's pretty like common sense to me. I'm just sharing your screen because I forgot to share that on your wall, so I'm just going to do that right now.
Well, what I had to coin a term. Far left spirituality. So far left spirituality is where the practitioners of this spirituality have internalized how bad men are, and how masculinity is fundamentally problematic and oppressive, okay? And so that actually infiltrates all spiritual considerations. And then men who want to be good in their own self-image and project goodness to others internalize this feminine spirituality, that this far left feminine spirituality that casts their masculinity and their manhood as problematic. And again, this is emasculation from another angle, okay? So that, again, the man can't show up in any powerful way in any dominant way. And when I say dominant, I don't mean that they're egocentrically, toxically oppressing another person through domination. I mean their energetic presence, their energetic truth fills the room, and you know you're dealing with a powerful, magnanimous soul. Okay? And you're like, damn, respect.
And you still going there? Thought you're
No, I'm just pausing.
Okay. So and it's interesting for me, like I don't know, I see this all the time now, right? And it's just so obvious, and I see it with my friends, I see it with, you know, my parents' friends, like just the men that have, like men and women, but it seems to be especially men, have really internalized a lot of this. And for me, like, it's interesting. I come from a bit of a different background where, you know, I never ever saw like men as bad. And none of that kind of brainwashing and indoctrination. I never got sucked into that, luckily. You know, like I was screwed up enough, right? Like I didn't need that on top of that. Like with my issues of just severe social anxiety. If I had that, like, you know, I probably just would have, I'd still just be masturbating to porn and playing World of Warcraft. But even outside of that, right? Like we're not exposed at all, or very little, to what the idea that men and women are really fundamentally different, right? This whole like masculine and feminine women. So what I bought into was more of the, like, women are the same, like men and women are the same, and kind of this androgynous belief, right? Like that we should kind of, it's like that golden rule, right? Like treat everybody the way that you want to treat yourself, or that you'd want to treat it. But that rule is bullshit if you really think about it.
Yes.
Because like why would I want you know, like I want a woman, for example, to submit to my leadership. Should I be submitting to her leadership because that's the way that I want to be treated? It makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense. Like it's, and that's kind of what I was always following in my mind, just like treating everybody the same. And there is a big, like, or this is really big, this like telling somebody, well, we'll say like telling somebody what to do, or like leading them in some way, like leading a woman is disrespectful in some way. So I've been like, that was a big part for me that I had to reprogram in myself. And it really started when I first started meeting women and learning to date women and learning about this stuff. And then it really continued, or took a next step up when I started following you. But it's so ingrained that doing that is somehow disrespectful, and that having a woman submit to that is disrespectful. And the missing piece there that I never understood until I came across your wall is that it's not disrespectful at all, and it's fully reciprocal as long as the man is leading with devotion.
Yeah.
Because that's the trade, right? That's the reciprocal trade, where it is respectful, and the natural exchange, I guess, energetic exchange, where a woman is submitting and respecting a man's leadership, and a man is devoting and leading in a way that where he really genuinely cares about how a woman feels, and protecting her heart, and meeting her needs based on his leadership.
Right. His dominance is sourced in his heart, which is why it's not violent or disrespectful or oppressive. You know, and when I say dominance, I mean a man in his masculine who is dominant just leads by the virtue of the way he shows up. He's just leading, and because there's a superior energy and a superior perspective base there. And what does that mean now? And that actually dovetails back with the far left ideology, which is how can a man lead? How could he be dominant? And it gets down to truth. A man has to actually feel truth in him. And, you know, he doesn't capitulate to this idea that truth is oppressive and we must keep everything as a relativistic flatland. If you're going to lead, you're going to lead somewhere. And that means you need to have a sense of truth. And, you know, in Truth Cock, I talk about masculinity as truth itself. The truth is the embodied presence of a man, right? And Truth Cock is this like post-spiritual path of radical masculinity, as I frame it. Okay, so the more truth that you embody, inhabit, and live, and realize yourself to be, the more you lead. But how can we have truth today? Truth is relative. I learned that in college, you know, and that's where, you know, again, this far left ideology wants to deconstruct everything that it senses as oppressive, and truth is oppressive. But it's obviously all self-contradictory once you start to pick it apart.
Yeah, and a big part of that is, and you've talked about this on your wall, and I also have read this in your book too, this idea about judgments, right? And you know, this is also combined with like the what's taught in university. There's actually a lot of overlap with a lot of the spirituality movement, which you know, there's good stuff in the spirituality movement, but there's also a lot of nonsense that I think is really destructive, especially for men. And part of that is this whole idea of like judgments being a bad thing, right? And I never like it like I encountered this so much you know, just during on my journey, like as I was, you know, meeting women and dating, especially with you know, as I was getting older in my late 20s, and I was sometimes dating women, you know, just out of university or in university or whatever, as well as lots of women that were older than me too. I don't care about age at all. But this whole idea about judging being bad, and the thing is, like, I always judged everything, right? Like I love judging. Judging is awesome. Because like I'm going to put labels on things that are right and wrong, bad and good. This is a survival thing, right? Like, where do we get judgments? If you look at it from a more primitive perspective, it's like an animal like a beaver is going to judge like a yummy maple tree as being good, and like not a lion, I don't know what, like a cougar, that's a bad thing, right? Like, obviously it's not going to be actually thinking those labels, right? A beaver doesn't
Right.
have thought, but that's where these judgments come from. It's like, we know things are good and we know things are bad, and that's how we determine whether something has value for us or not. Like, you know, eating a hamburger, that has value, survival value, and that's a good thing. And being punched in the face, that is a bad thing. Like, I'm going to judge that. You know, being having a whole bunch of insane laws that are enslaving us as a society, I'm going to judge that as bad. Like, I have no problem putting a judgment on that. But what I found was, evil, and what I found was, even though, like, you know, there's two kinds of judgments, right? And I actually want to hear your perspective more on this. You know, when I would make judgments, there wouldn't even be any judgmental energy behind it. I'd just be like, you know, this is something that's happening in university where we're like, as an example, like, we're taking on a whole bunch of debt and we're learning complete nonsense. And I'd be like, well, that's bullshit. That's my label. Like, I'm judging that. That's complete bullshit. And people, especially women, would be kind of like, I'm not going to say offended, because I think they were also quite attracted to me at this. There was some offense, but it wasn't like they got angry. But I could tell, like, their brains exploding a lot of the time, where it's like, oh, you're not, like, you shouldn't be judging. Like, you shouldn't be making these kind of judgments, because my judgments would be so extreme too, right? It's not just like, this is good, this is bad. It's like, this is fucked. This is a stupid thing. And I wouldn't say it in a judgmental way. Like my energy, it's like but just the way I'm saying it to you, right? It's not like I'm not saying like you as a person are stupid, and I'm not like judging her, but I'm saying this as a way of being and a way of living and a way of educating ourselves is screwed up. And there would be like a lot of people think that there's something wrong with that, having those kind of judgments. So I wanted to hear your thoughts more on this whole judgment topic, because I think this is a huge part of masculinity, and what it is to be a man.
And I think people love to soften it and say discernment as opposed to judgment. That's a nice feminization of it. And when I say feminization, I'm not criticizing the feminine. I'm just saying what I think is the case, right? I don't criticize the feminine, you know? So yeah, you know, a judgment has moral force to it. And then, you know, we can get acclimated to that moral force over time, and just our judgment becomes a de facto thing. Like, yeah, you know, higher education is indoctrination, and we don't necessarily feel the moral charge behind it. There's not this explosive indignation over this evil phenomenon. It's like, yeah, I'm accustomed to that now. Like, you know, with recent events, my moral indignation was off the charts at what happened, and it still is, but I'm now acclimated to it. With respect, and you know, so it doesn't affect me the same way that it did initially, but it's definitely not my new normal as it is for others. I hate it. I hate it. You know, and to get back to masculinity, the masculinity is the transcendental impulse. Okay, in the sense that there's verticality to masculinity. There's self-overcoming. Constant self-overcoming, and the engine of self-overcoming, the engine of transcendence, is judgment. You're making a moral stance on something inferior, and you're moving toward the superior. Okay, whatever that is for you, however you understand it. You know, to give you a personal example, when I do my Imprava Sutras, I meditate. I'm making a judgment during meditation to cut out everything and just to sit there in samadhi. That's a judgment, and that's hardcore transcendental. Now, the feminine is more horizontal and wants to relationally love in communion and to care for things. And that is awesome. Now, what, you know, these women in college were doing were like, wow, you know, that's just way too much. Let's just love each other and accept everything, and let's just be in harmony with reality. And a man can, if he's surrounded by that, can be emasculated by that. He's just like, you know what? Yeah, okay, maybe I shouldn't judge. You know, this notion that things could be better. You know, if you notice in yourself, and I noticed this in myself, that when I really started to tap into that engine of judgment, I became more accepting of my moral charge around things. I'm like, yeah, this is fucked up. And I was like, you know, if every man were this way, a lot of the shit that's going down wouldn't be going down. I say that a culture of high masculine men would not accept deception at the extent that it's happening now, and has happened for a long time. Just to tie it back into the far left ideology, when you have the far left ideology program running, it's also very akin to collectivism. And so if you have this collectivism program running, that's another way that you can diminish your power as a solitary self-sovereign individual, because it's the solitary self-sovereign individual, not only solitary, but has that capacity, who makes judgments on the crowd, on the herd, on the masses. He just does. The masculine does that. The really watered down, lukewarm masculine won't do it. Not powerful enough to actually pop the head up and say, this is fucked up. And so when you have this systemic emasculation, which I call basically the greatest, most invisible epidemic in the world, then you have billions of people following these agendas. Sorry, gotta say it, you know, following a lot of deception, and it's to their detriment and to the detriment of the people they love. And this is part of what I talk about in Truth Cock.
And yeah, and so I also think that the whole judgment thing, it really ties into a man's inner vision, right? I talk
Yes,
a lot about like the
absolutely.
masculine has an inner vision that he is leading towards, and that is like the core of masculinity. If he's not
Yes,
leading towards an inner vision, that what's he doing? He's masturbating to porn and he's playing World of Warcraft. That's all he's
exactly.
doing. And
Exactly.
to have an inner vision, you need to be able to judge. You need to be able to judge the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. Because when I am creating my inner vision, I have a value system. It's like, okay, watching porn all day is not as good as
Right.
having a great feminine wife and having like a working on my mission and
It's
all
inferior.
that. It's inferior. It's extremely inferior, right?
Extremely
And
inferior.
and so as
We
a
don't
man,
know this from experience.
yeah, exactly. And so as a man, right, what the masculine does is he makes all these judgments about what is inferior and what is superior. What is like my optimal reality, like my
Right.
perfect inner vision that I want, which is fluid and it's going to change over time. The things that I wanted 5 or 10 years ago, my inner vision is very different than I want today. And so I have my inner vision based on my judgments, based on my version of morality and good and bad and superior and inferior, and then I am leading towards it every chance I get. Right? It's like, okay. So if I'm a man, right, and I've been indoctrinated in a bunch of nonsense and like girls don't find me attractive, and I have nothing going on in my life, and I don't have much of a passion or anything like that, which is kind of similar to what I was like when I was 23, right? Like literally when I was 23, I just spent 2 years playing World of Warcraft for 14 hours a day, maybe more, 13 to 16 hours a day, right? And masturbating. Playing World of Warcraft and masturbating. And it's interesting because I want to segue into this video game thing for a second, because what video games do is they like they suck out a man's
Testicles.
uh what is that?
Testicles.
Yeah, they definitely suck out his testicles. And instead of having like an inner vision in the real world, right? Like I was very goal oriented as a person. It was just I was so scared of going out and achieving those goals because of the fear of rejection and failure and making mistakes and all that stuff. But what are video games? They have all these goals. They have all these things that you can be achieving. It is basically a way for a man to have an inner vision and kind of sort of feel like a man, like, because there are those things operating where it's like, I'm like a level 60 warrior and I get to like fight bad guys in a dungeon, and my inner vision is having like all this better armor and weapons and increasing my status in my guild and all this stuff, right? So it's like instead of having an inner vision that he's working towards in the real world, it's just a completely useless inner vision that is being like channeled into a video game. All his energy is being channeled into the video game, and so he's not being masculine at all in the real world. He's just it's enabling him to be like, I don't even want to say feminine. It's just like, but like certainly emasculated, right?
Yeah.
It's like extremely emasculated. Whereas in the game, he could be quite masculine because that's where all his energy is going. And it's
That's
like, it's interesting for me because I think I always did have, I was always tapped into a lot of my masculine energy and being goal oriented. It's just, I was so terrified of the rejection and the mistakes and the failure and stuff that it was all channeled into video games. It's like, I was here's my chance to brag. I was a guild master in World of Warcraft, right? I had my own guild. I led a group of, I don't know, 80 people or something, 100 people. I was the main tank in my guild, right? Like, and I was the raid leader. I was in charge of like leading the raid. So it was like all these really masculine things that I was doing, and it was all being completely wasted.
Yeah.
Completely 100% wasted.
You know, I call that kind of the systematization of mediocrity. So there's just all these chances in Western culture to be mediocre. And I mean, I know you just said all the great things you achieved, but but it's like what happens is the masculine agency, the penetration, is co-opted by all these mediocre opportunities. So instead of using that masculine agency to penetrate reality, it's just too fearsome to do that. So we go into a video game, and then we sublimate the penetrative impulse, and we penetrate in a world that's highly addictive, but without any real consequences outside of it in a positive sense. Of course, the consequences are quite severe in the negative sense. If you have a culture of males, you know, millions of males whose masculine agency is being co-opted by these artificial engagements, then you've got a systemic mediocritization of those males. And it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible. And I mean, the opportunities for abdicating your agency are innumerable. And that's especially if you have no sense of truth. So you've got all these diversions, all this hedonism down here, down below, and then you've got no truth up here toward which to go. So why would you penetrate reality? Why would you go out there and be with woman and world? Fuck that. There's nothing out there for me. And this is all so much more gratifying, you know? And the diversions get subtler and subtler and subtler for co-opting masculine agency until you're just like, whoa. Because the what's the word I'm looking for? The emasculating influences are omnidirectional. They're all around us. They're omnipresent. We men who are committed to their masculinity and accentuating that and developing that have to constantly be aware of these emasculating influences their whole life. And it's not just from the media and entertainment and from one's job and one's education, but can be from one's partner, and it can be from within. You know, what is it, this thing that makes me dilute my agency? Because the most radical masculinity is going to penetrate irrespective of conditions. You know, if that's what's required, if that's what's there. And so if we can see in ourselves when we kind of recoil or water ourselves down and don't do it.
Yeah. I just want to respond to Lydia, who says, I have 4 21 and under sons who need to hear this. How can I get them to hear this message so they will listen? I'd love your thoughts. And this goes into what you're saying, I think, where, you know, because there, and this was about the, I think the video game thing is what she's referring to. And going into what you were saying, there are so many of these, you know, emasculating things like in our society that are like men are being attacked by subtly, that they don't even realize that that are emasculating them and sapping their true masculine core, like video games probably being one of the worst ones, I think, for like teenagers. And, you know, the biggest, I would say, like the biggest problem that I think we have is that we have so few, at least for, well, I'd say for men and for teenage boys, we have so few masculine, like actual real masculine influences as role models, right? It's like, sure, we have, you know, football players and you know, men like that probably like cheated on their wives 8 times that week, and you know, we have like this shell of masculinity, I guess. Like there is some masculinity involved in some of these, I would say, not very good role models.
Yeah.
But we have very, like, it's not, that's not what is going to inspire most boys and most men to be better. Like,
Right.
first of all, I'm not going to be a football star, so what am I going to do with that? But like, who is really teaching masculinity? Like, we got you and me, and then we've got a whole bunch of coaches that are teaching this watered down, feminized garbage masculinity that, you know, some people are, you know, some men and boys are attracted to, I guess. But we just, and then we have so many absent fathers who are not being masculine. They don't know how to be masculine. We don't have any like initiation into becoming a man and becoming masculine. And, you know, for me, a big part of my background, like when I wasn't masturbating and I wasn't wasn't played video games, is I worked at summer camp, right? I worked at summer camp for, it was usually around 11 to 14-year-old kids. And but the best experience I had was when, so I guess 18 to 23, I think, was the age that I was at. I did this for 5 years. I worked at an all boys camp, and I would lead trips for boys. And it was, oh, like, I just can't, it's just really sad because, you know, for whatever reason, I really had this deep ingrained belief in children and in boys and girls, but, you know, I worked with boys more, but just this belief that, like, kids are so far beyond capable of doing anything if you put your trust in them and give them the opportunities, and especially with boys, to give them responsibility. So while pretty much all the staff in my at this camp would, like, you know, they take I shouldn't say all staff, because I don't know how all the trips went, but the trips that I went on where I wasn't the leader, and from what I heard from the kids, it's like they weren't given a ton of opportunity to take responsibility. It's like, you know, they were told to do the dishes, and they were like, could help cut up stuff with the food, and they would put up their own tents, and that was about it. Whereas with me, I was like, these are friggin' 13-year-old kids. Like, they can do so much more than that. So what I did is I set out recipes for everything, and I set out instructions for the washing dishes. And for the first day, I would show them how to do everything, right? It's like, I'm showing them as a man, like, this is how you set up your tent. This is how you do dishes. This is how you cook a meal. Here's our map. This is how to read a map. This is how you pull up the canoes onto shore. This is how you put away all the food at night so that the bears don't eat it, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I told them, like, okay, day 2, these are 7-day trips. Day 2, I'm not doing anything. So you guys better figure this out. This is your trip. This is not my trip. All I did after that was solve problem behavior, like conflicts and stuff that came up. And I didn't tell anyone who's in charge. I was just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I showed you how to do it. I showed you how to be a man. Now I'm not doing it anymore. And then over the period of the next 6 days, you know, the first day, these kids were completely useless. Like, just idiots. Like, the mistakes that they made were just like, oh my God, like, how can you be so dumb? But, you know, they were never given these responsibilities, right? And they were never given the opportunities to make these kind of mistakes and to just screw up without, you know, being judged for it, and like for someone to take over again, right? They weren't taught how to be men. But like at that age, you know, they should really be taught how to be men. They're ready for it. They're ready for it. And so, yeah, day 2, they were useless, but then very quickly they had to become not useless, because like the food's not getting cooked. If they don't figure it out, the tents aren't getting put up, like nothing's getting done. I'm just going to sit around watching. And by like day, I don't know, between day 4 and 6, you know, someone had like hugely stepped up, like one of the boys, to the point where like they are the leader. Mm-hmm. They are a better leader than a lot of the staff at the camp that had been working there for years. And usually, like, there'd often be like 2 leaders kind of thing, and like there'd be a few people that stepped up, and then the rest of the boys would like try to lead themselves, right, and step up to like not have to be told what to do all the time. But you could just see how they were working together so much, and really taking charge of their own lives. It's like,
Yeah.
boys are so unbelievably capable of being men, but they need a masculine role model to show them how to be men and trust them to be men, and not judge them for screwing up, for not for just being able to make mistakes, and then rewarding them and been like, you're like, you know, you're just as good as me. You're a man like me, right? Like, yeah, sure, you're a little less mature and knowledgeable, but like you're on my level, and like you're doing awesome. Like rewarding them for that. Like it's just, boys have, like, I feel so bad for boys because there's so much potential in them, but they're just not being, and girls too, right? Like in a different way. But the question was about teenage boys. They're just not being given the opportunity to really grow up and to shine in the way that they, to be leaders.
Yeah, you know, agency in boys needs to be nurtured. And as you were saying, you know, they could do so much more than the little chores they were given. And as adults, that agency, as men, that agency can continue to expand. And in the book, I say masculinity is inexhaustible. I also say masculinity is hunger. Carl made a great comment here. Men are hungry for responsibility and accountability. So that hunger, and this is another thing, the hunger that we have to take on the chores, responsibilities, the mission, the truth, is our masculinity as well. And it's what keeps us penetrating and penetrating. I have one of my favorite movies is Free Solo with Alex Honnold. And he free soloed El Capitan. He climbed 3,000 feet up a pretty much almost a 90-degree rock face, and without any ropes or any protective gear. That was his mission. His great buddy, Tommy Caldwell, scaled the Dawn Wall, which was on El Capitan as well, but the hardest part, and it took him years. So these guys had this inexhaustible hunger, and it's very easy to see it when it's dealing with the gross realm of climbing rocks, for example. Now, not all men are going to be doing such gross feats, climbing rocks. So, you know, one of the things that I talk about in Truth Cock is these kind of invisible, subtle truths and missions and purposes that orient us, guide us, and inspire us, but they have to be kind of inexhaustible. So what I've set up for myself is inexhaustible and almost seems unachievable. And it's my mountain that I climb. It's subtle. It comes from within. It's invisible. No one can see it, but I know it. And it is my truth. And when I'm living that truth and penetrating it with inexhaustible masculinity, with inexhaustible hunger, that's Truth Cock. And all of a sudden, I am a magnanimously powerful man, right? I'm dominant. Why? Because I know, I know truth. I know my truth, which is coextensive and non-dual with absolute truth, which is another thing I keep trying to say to people. When you're really in your truth as a man, in the masculine, that's the absolute as well. It's non-dual. So the reason I'm talking about this is I'm supplementing what you're saying about the boys, because when those boys grow up, what are they going to be challenged by that nourishes their agency and captivates them so that they keep on exercising that agency? Some will go climb mountains. But for me, it's like I had to invent an entire spiritual lineage with 9 levels and 3 hours of meditation, 3 hours of performance, 9 characters. I wouldn't be teaching anything that I'm teaching unless I had that, because that's the real world application of all this stuff that we're talking about.
Wow. So I can't wait to go deeper in this and first of all, finish the book, because I'm only about halfway through. But there's a lot more that we have to discuss about this. So I think our plan, right, is For the second video, this is going to be a multi-part series. I'm not even sure how long we're going to go here, but the next one, the next video, let's try to make it like an hour, right? We'll make it longer, or maybe like 2 parts, 30 minutes. We're going to do in my groups, the masculine and feminine group. It's going to be there, and so all of my subscribers are going to have full access to it. We might do a few videos. And do you want to announce now what you're doing?
Oh, sure. So
Okay.
I just published Truth Cock, Volume 1, The Fourfold Penetration. And actually, it's the Fourfold Thunderbolt, not the Fourfold Penetration. So, and it's one volume of 12. And now Zach and I are talking about how we want to go forward with this, because I'm creating a study course based on these 12 volumes. It's going to last a year. Each month is dedicated to one volume. So Zach and I are talking about how we want to kind of coordinate something together, and we're still figuring it out. But what you should know, if you know me on Facebook, if you've been visiting my wall for some time, I've been posting on this stuff for at least a couple of years. And so these 12 volumes span those 2 years. So it's got my posts, it's got my, my little haiku posts, and then it has my micro essays and also comments. Everything that I wrote about this, I put in documents, and now I'm publishing over a 12-month period. And the essence is, as I said earlier, that radical masculinity as a post-spiritual path includes the great stuff of spirituality, but gets rid of that shitty baggage that always just emasculates men. I mean, that's the best way to put it. And so it's really about stepping wholeheartedly into masculinity. But this would be very beneficial for women as well to know about. It's not just for men. I'm very passionate about teaching men, but love teaching women as well. Because if a woman knows what a man has inside of him, what a man's got to do to be, his masculine self, she can nourish that. At the very least, she can get out of the way of that and eventually learn not just to appreciate it, but celebrate it. And when that happens, she will start to experience more polarity with that man. And polarity is a great thing. It means it's the maximal attraction. The more polarity, the more attraction on an energetic and erotic level. So yeah, that's the essence.
Yeah, and I think that, and it's the same with men, right? Like, I have learned so much about what it is to be a man by developing all these theories, well, not theories, but concepts, right? Like concepts about the feminine and understanding what it is to be feminine and what the feminine needs, right? Because like, how is a man going to lead and like nurture and protect a woman's heart and devote himself to her if he doesn't truly understand what the feminine is and what the feminine needs and what the feminine needs him to be as well, right? So they're like, absolutely, women can benefit, I think, a ton from what you're learning and from what we're going to be talking about. So when we do future videos like this, it's not just going to be in my masculine group. It's also going to be in my feminine group for women, because I think they're going to benefit a lot. And when you start your course, Mark, we haven't fully decided how we're going to integrate that in my groups, but everyone that's in your course is also going to get access to these videos too, right? In addition to your video or your live stream coursework that you're going to do.
You mean everybody in the Truth Cock study group would get access to these? I hadn't thought that through. We can discuss that if that. Because the way I was thinking of it is that it would be, something different. But I like the idea. It's good.
Yeah, more value, right?
And more
all
value.
About giving people more value. Okay, so we're at 45 minutes. I think that's a good place to end it. So we'll do parts 2 and 3 in my groups and save them for your course study, and then probably do another one, maybe part 4 we'll do public. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I just want to take a moment to thank you. for inviting me to talk, and also for everything that you're doing on your wall and your groups with men and women, just how you're showing up. I think it's awesome. I also want to thank everybody who's showed up in the comments. I see some friends here, some new friends and some older friends, and thank everybody who's going to watch this video for showing up and taking part.
Yeah, so thank you everyone too, and thank you, Mark. Honestly, I don't think I would be doing this if I hadn't found you. The universe definitely wanted me to find you, and it showed me you and your wall right at the perfect time. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
We'll talk to everybody.
We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.